moving forward, embracing a realistic approach to new interests. The mindful enthusiast, balancing passion with practicality, cultivating passion with purpose. Sustained enthusiasm requires something most people actively avoid: pre-commitment to boredom. After managing a renewable energy project in Denmark that spanned 4 years, I watched team members cycle through personal obsessions with astonishing regularity. CrossFit, woodworking, cryptocurrency trading, competitive cycling. The pattern was reliable: 3 weeks of breathless updates, 2 months of visible equipment, then silence. Many purchases follow this trend. Expensive road bikes, for instance, often see initial excitement give way to minimal use. What distinguished the few who maintained interests wasn't superior passion. They'd simply done unglamorous reconnaissance before spending money. They'd attended a spinning class at 6 a.m. in January to simulate the least appealing version of cycling. They'd researched not the best bikes, but the specific reasons people quit after buying them: storage hassles, maintenance costs, the reality of riding in rain. Purposeful action begins with deliberate disillusionment. Before committing resources to any new interest, you need to actively seek its least romantic expression. Want to learn pottery? Don't watch satisfying Instagram videos of centered clay. Find accounts documenting wedging injuries, kiln disasters, and the storage problems created by 17 mediocre bowls. This isn't pessimism. It's inoculation against the fantasy that derails most new pursuits. The goal isn't to kill enthusiasm, but to transform it into something durable. When you've already imagined the worst-case scenario and still feel drawn to an interest, you've discovered something worth pursuing. Setting boundaries for balance. Boundaries are the architecture of sustainability. Without them, every new interest becomes a totalizing force that consumes weekends, displaces existing relationships, and generates the kind of exhaustion that masquerades as dedication. I've watched team members on tight project deadlines somehow dedicate 20 hours weekly to demanding hobbies, then wonder why their partnerships felt strained and their sleep deteriorated. They confused intensity with commitment, mistaking the dopamine rush of complete immersion for evidence they'd found their calling. Real boundaries aren't aspirational, they're structural. They answer specific questions. How many hours weekly can this interest occupy without cannibalizing sleep, relationships, or existing obligations? What's the maximum monthly financial commitment that won't require lifestyle contortion? At what point does pursuing this stop being energizing and start requiring recovery? The most useful boundary isn't time-based, but displacement-based. Before adding something new, you need to honestly identify what it replaces. Your calendar is already full. Enthusiasm doesn't create hours. When a team member announced he was learning Mandarin, I asked what he was stopping to make room. He looked confused. 2 months later, he'd abandoned both the language app and his previous routine of evening walks, the thing that had actually been managing his stress. Overcommitment emerges from underestimating invisible costs. Every interest demands not just active practice time, but cognitive overhead. Researching techniques, maintaining equipment, scheduling sessions, managing the guilt when life intervenes. These peripherals often consume more energy than the activity itself. The boundary that matters most is the one protecting your interest from yourself. Sustainable engagement requires permission to show up partially, to practice 20 minutes instead of 2 hours when that's what your actual life permits. Without that flexibility, the first scheduling conflict becomes an extinction event rather than a minor adjustment. Integrating interests into daily life. Integrating new interests into daily life doesn't require abandoning everything else or achieving perfection from day one. The goal is finding sustainable ways to engage without creating chaos in responsibilities that already demand your time and energy. Think of it as adding spice to a familiar recipe, enhancing what's there without overpowering the essential flavors. Start with micro-commitments that fit naturally into existing routines. If painting intrigues you, dedicate 15 minutes after dinner, rather than blocking out entire Saturdays. If learning Spanish calls to you, practice during your commute, instead of enrolling in intensive evening courses that clash with family time. These small, deliberate moments create consistency without overwhelming your schedule or draining your reserves. Flexibility matters more than rigid planning. Life shifts unexpectedly. Projects intensify at work. Family needs escalate. Energy levels fluctuate. Build adaptability into your approach by treating your new interest as a dynamic element of your life, not a contractual obligation. If this week offers only one session instead of 3, that's progress, not failure. The real art lies in recognizing when pursuit becomes burden. If your new interest generates stress rather than satisfaction, reassess your approach. Perhaps the format doesn't suit your lifestyle, or maybe the timing isn't right. Adjusting expectations and methods isn't quitting. It's honoring both your curiosity and your reality. Joy emerges when new interests complement, rather than compete with your existing commitments. By weaving them thoughtfully into your days, you create space for genuine fulfillment, without sacrificing the practical foundations that keep life functioning. The roadmap to real interest. Setting intentional paths. Clarifying core interests. Most people can't distinguish between genuine interest and emotional anesthesia masquerading as passion. The difference reveals itself not in the initial spark, but in what happens when the novelty wears off and you're confronted with tedious repetition. Real interest survives boredom. If you're learning Spanish because the language itself fascinates you, conjugating irregular verbs feels like solving puzzles rather than punishment. If you're learning Spanish to become someone who speaks Spanish, to inhabit a more sophisticated identity, or escape the person you currently are, then verb tables feel like betrayal. The activity promised transformation, but delivered homework. The diagnostic test requires uncomfortable honesty. Ask yourself, am I drawn to the doing or the having done? Do you envision yourself performing, speaking fluently at Barcelona cafes, exhibiting paintings at galleries? Or do you imagine the unglamorous middle? Can you picture yourself enjoyably struggling through Lesson 47 on a rainy Tuesday? Or does your mental movie skip directly to applause? Avoidance behavior disguises itself as enthusiasm with remarkable sophistication. When you're running from job dissatisfaction, relationship strain, or nameless restlessness, new interests arrive offering complete reinvention. The problem isn't the interest itself. Pottery or coding or ultramarathons might be perfectly legitimate pursuits. The problem is the unconscious demand you've placed on them. Fix everything else that's broken. This creates a vicious cycle. You expect the hobby to solve problems it can't address, then interpret its failure to transform your life as evidence the hobby itself was wrong. So you search for the next one, carrying the same unexamined expectations, ensuring the same disappointing outcome. The solution isn't abandoning new interests, it's conducting research that most people skip entirely, investigating what you'll need to endure rather than what you hope to achieve. Crafting a flexible plan. A decade ago, I managed a renewable energy project team where a junior engineer volunteered to lead our community outreach program. They dedicated weeks researching presentation software, acquiring professional audio equipment, and designing intricate slide decks. Yet each time a community meeting approached, typically on a Thursday evening in a high school cafeteria, facing skeptical residents, they called in sick. This pattern repeated several times before they admitted the truth. They loved the idea of being a charismatic public communicator, but standing before skeptical strangers made them nauseous. The outreach role became someone else's responsibility. They weren't lazy or uncommitted. They had simply confused aspirational identity with genuine interest. What separated this from typical abandonment was what happened next. Instead of disappearing into shame, they conducted what they called failure forensics. They examined why outreach appealed initially: visibility, perceived status, escape from technical tedium, versus what it actually required: comfort with hostility, improvisational thinking, tolerance for logistical chaos. They discovered that technical writing, translating complex engineering into accessible language, offered the communication challenge they craved without the performance anxiety they couldn't metabolize. They spent 6 months writing project documentation that nobody forced them to improve. That's the signal. When you do the boring version of something without external pressure, you've found real interest rather than identity theater. The difference wasn't talent or discipline. It was honest reconnaissance before commitment, examining whether you're moving toward something that genuinely suits your wiring or away from discomfort you haven't named. Most people skip this diagnostic entirely, then blame themselves when enthusiasm evaporates on contact with reality. Implementing with intent. After clarifying what truly interests you and designing a flexible roadmap, the next challenge becomes living it, translating intention into consistent, meaningful action. This is where most well-crafted plans meet their demise, not from poor design, but from the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. Start with implementation intentions, a deceptively simple technique that transforms vague commitments into concrete actions. Instead of, "I'll practice guitar this week," specify, "When I finish dinner on Tuesday and Thursday, I will play scales for 15 minutes in the living room." The formula, "When situation, I will action in location," bypasses the decision fatigue that erodes motivation. Your brain stops debating whether to engage and simply executes the pre-decided plan. But intentions alone won't sustain you through the inevitable slumps. Build what behavioral scientists call friction reduction into your environment. If your new interest requires setup time, leave equipment visible and accessible. The guitar stays on its stand, not in the case. Running shoes wait by the door. The sketchbook lives on the coffee table, pencils already sharpened. Every barrier you remove, every moment of preparation you eliminate, increases the likelihood you'll actually begin when motivation wavers. Equally important, engineer friction into competing distractions. The television remote goes in a drawer. Social media apps move off your home screen. The couch that swallows your evenings gets repositioned. You're not eliminating alternatives. You're making the intentional choice slightly easier than the default drift. Track engagement, not outcomes. Did you show up? Count that. The quality of your pottery, the speed of your Korean vocabulary acquisition, the elegance of your code. These improve through repetition, but they're unreliable motivators. Showing up consistently matters more than excelling sporadically. Mark your calendar. Celebrate streaks. Acknowledge the discipline of appearance, even when inspiration doesn't. When momentum inevitably falters, and it will, return to your original clarification. Does this still align with what genuinely interests you? Sometimes the answer is no, and that's valuable information. More often, you'll rediscover the spark that drew you forward, now refined by experience into something more sustainable than initial enthusiasm ever was. Embracing detours. Learning from every journey. The value of unexpected turns. Most people treat abandoned interests like personal failures requiring explanation. But when you're willing to look honestly at the pattern, those detours often taught you more than the destination would have. Consider the experience of someone who spent 8 months learning Spanish before switching to Arabic. Though a partner might view it as typical, never finishing anything, the Spanish detour wasn't wasted. It revealed personal learning patterns, how the brain processes language structure, a tendency to favor comfortable reading over speaking practice, and the critical point around the 3-month mark, when novelty fades and discipline becomes crucial. Applying these insights, the Arabic learner might prioritize conversation partners from day one, schedule grammar drills immediately, and build in weekly checkpoints at known plateaus. The detour became reconnaissance. This reframing isn't motivational comfort, it's strategic salvage. Every abandoned pursuit generates operational intelligence if you're willing to extract it. You learned what frustrates you, what sustains you past frustration, and whether the activity addressed the actual problem or just distracted from it temporarily. That ceramics phase that lasted 6 weeks? It revealed you need immediate tactile feedback, struggle with projects requiring multi-day patience, and thrive when mess is contained to specific spaces. Those aren't failures, they're specifications. The difference between people who eventually find sustainable interests and those perpetually starting over isn't fewer detours. It's treating each one as useful rather than shameful. When you quit photography after 4 months, you didn't waste money on that lens. You purchased information about whether you genuinely enjoy solitary observation or just like the idea of being someone who does. Lessons in flexibility. In project management, a well-established principle holds that the cost of correcting errors or making changes escalates dramatically as a project advances. Shu, 2004, Griffiths, 2015. I witnessed this firsthand on a civil engineering project where unexpected geological conditions surfaced during initial site surveys. The team could have panicked, schedules were tight, budgets fixed, stakeholders anxious. Instead, they reframed this apparent disaster as an early warning system, recognizing they'd discovered inevitable problems before pouring concrete. The pivot enabled a more robust foundation design, ultimately saving both the project and several $1 million. That reframe changed everything. Flexibility isn't about cheerfully accepting chaos or abandoning all structure. It's about acknowledging a fundamental truth. Your initial plan was constructed with incomplete information. When new data arrives, whether it's discovering that pottery requires more physical space than your apartment offers, or that learning Mandarin demands more consistent practice than your travel schedule allows, the intelligent response is adaptation, not stubborn adherence to an outdated blueprint. The same principle applies to personal interests. When circumstances shift or motivation reveals different patterns than expected, pivoting isn't failure, it's strategy. The question isn't whether you'll encounter detours, but whether you'll use them as opportunities to recalibrate toward what genuinely works. Reassessing goals and interests. Recalibration only works if you actually perform the assessment. Most people skip this step entirely, operating on autopilot until an interest has fully collapsed. The mechanism requires intentional pauses, not when motivation dies, but before the death rattle begins. I recommend scheduling these evaluations quarterly, treating them with the same non-negotiable status as financial reviews or medical checkups. The evaluation itself demands uncomfortable honesty. Start by asking, am I still curious about this thing itself, or am I attached to the identity it provides? If you find yourself continually acquiring new art supplies for a project that never starts, or endlessly researching travel destinations without ever booking a trip, you've located the answer. Genuine interest manifests in behavior, not narrative. This disconnect between story and action reveals everything. You might tell yourself you're passionate about photography, while your camera gathers dust for months. The lie isn't malicious, it's protective, shielding you from the discomfort of admitting you've changed or that the initial spark has quietly extinguished. But prolonging the fiction wastes resources that could flow towards something that actually holds your attention. The reassessment process isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. When you identify a temporary distraction masquerading as a true passion, you're not failing, you're course correcting. And sometimes that correction means letting go entirely, which might be the most honest act of self-respect you can offer. Finding joy in the journey. The destination might change, and that's fine. Really. The sketches you abandoned might become ideas for something else entirely. The guitar gathering dust could wait years before you pick it up again. Or it might never leave the case. And that's not a tragedy. What matters is what happened while you were there. Maybe you learned that early mornings aren't your creative sweet spot. Or that you need structure more than you thought. Or that certain challenges excite you while others drain you completely. These insights don't expire just because the hobby did. Small victories matter more than grand finales. You showed up for 3 weeks straight before life got complicated. You figured out how to tune that guitar, even if you never learned a full song. You read half the book on photography before realizing you preferred taking terrible photos to studying perfect ones. Each of these moments taught you something about how you engage with the world. The exploration itself has value, separate from any measurable outcome. Some people find this frustrating. The modern obsession with productivity demands tangible results, preferably documented and shared. But learning happens in quiet moments too, in the process of trying and adjusting and sometimes walking away. Celebrating the journey doesn't mean pretending every detour was secretly brilliant, or that you have no regrets about the money spent on supplies you barely used. It means recognizing that engagement, even temporary engagement, contributes to understanding yourself better. That's worth something, even without a finished product to show for it. Celebrating progress. Recognizing growth over perfection. Reframing success. Small wins matter. Progress tracking fails most people not because they forget, but because they design systems that demand they already be the disciplined person they're trying to become. The solution is building something so stupidly simple it survives your worst week. Start with a physical calendar, not an app, and mark every day you make contact with the interest, regardless of duration or quality. 10 minutes of terrible Italian practice gets the same X as an hour of focused study. This removes the subjective judgment that kills momentum. You're not tracking excellence, you're tracking existence. A paper calendar mounted where you'll see it daily creates what behavioral psychologists call salient visibility. Your eyes register the pattern even when your brain isn't actively thinking about it. The visual chain of marked days becomes its own motivation, a quiet reminder that you're showing up, even imperfectly. Create a minimum viable session so laughably brief that excuses evaporate. This concept, akin to James Clear's 2-minute rule from Atomic Habits, emphasizes starting small to build consistency. For instance, a session could be wedging 1 ball of clay for pottery, tuning and playing 3 chords on a guitar, or simply putting on running shoes and stepping out the door. Most people set thresholds requiring peak motivation, then wonder why they can't sustain practice during ordinary weeks filled with mediocre energy and competing demands. The brilliance of the minimum viable session is that it bypasses the inner negotiation that derails most attempts before they begin. Clear, 2018. After each session, Immediately write one sentence about what surprised you, frustrated you, or made you curious. Not what you accomplished, what you noticed. This shifts assessment from performance metrics to investigative engagement. The G chord still sounds muddy, becomes less discouraging than only practiced 15 minutes, because one suggests a problem to solve while the other suggests inadequacy. Weekly, ask yourself 3 diagnostic questions. Did I think about this interest when I wasn't actively doing it? Did I feel genuine curiosity about improving something specific? Did I experience any moments, however brief, of absorption where time disappeared? 2 yes answers indicate sustainable interest worth protecting. 0 or 1 suggests you're maintaining a story rather than an actual engagement. Build a quit box for each interest, literally a physical container. When you're ready to stop, don't immediately purge supplies or cancel memberships. Put everything associated with the pursuit into the box, write today's date on it, and store it somewhere accessible. If 6 months pass without opening it, you have permission to let it go without guilt. But that waiting period removes the binary urgency of continue or destroy that forces premature decisions. Some interests deserve gentle endings, not dramatic abandonment. Growth mindset, from perfection to progress. Growth mindset has become one of those phrases that gets laundered through motivational posters until it loses meaning. But the underlying concept remains genuinely useful when rescued from inspirational platitudes. Carol Dweck's research distinguished between fixed mindset, believing abilities are static traits, and growth mindset, understanding that competence develops through effort over time. The difference shows up most clearly in how people interpret struggle. Fixed mindset treats difficulty as evidence of inadequacy. I'm bad at languages, rather than, I haven't developed language skills yet. This seemingly minor framing difference produces dramatically different behaviors. When challenges appear, fixed mindset collapses into avoidance or self-protection, while growth mindset leans into the discomfort as necessary friction for development. For abandoned hobbies specifically, this distinction becomes critical around week 6, when the novelty dopamine fades and actual skill building begins. Most people unconsciously operate from fixed mindset when starting new interests, expecting natural talent to reveal itself. However, research indicates that individuals with a growth mindset are significantly more likely to persist through the initial difficulties of skill acquisition, whether learning a musical instrument, a new language, or coding, because they interpret challenges as opportunities for development rather than proof of inherent limitation. The growth mindset reframe asks a different question entirely. Not, am I talented at this? But, what specifically needs practice? And am I willing to do that practice? This shift doesn't guarantee you'll sustain every interest, nor should it. Some pursuits genuinely don't fit your life's actual architecture, and recognizing that is wisdom, not weakness. But growth mindset prevents premature abandonment based on faulty interpretation of early struggles. Practically, this means catching yourself when frustration triggers identity-based narratives. I'm terrible at remembering vocabulary becomes, I haven't yet found a memorization system that works for how my brain operates. That second framing opens investigative possibilities rather than closing the case. It also means celebrating specific process improvements over vague outcome goals. Notice when you remember to breathe during yoga poses you previously white-knuckled through, or when chord transitions require less conscious thought than last month. These micro-improvements are actual skill development, but fixed mindset dismisses them as insufficient because you're not yet performing at imagined expert levels. The fundamental realization is simpler than most self-help frameworks suggest. You're allowed to be incompetent while becoming competent. Every expert you admire endured an extended period of producing mediocre work before excellence emerged. Your timeline might differ from theirs, your ultimate destination might look different, and some interests might not justify the investment required. But struggling during month 3 doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're exactly where the process demands you be. Conclusion. When you first opened these pages, you likely carried the subtle, nagging weight of intentions unfulfilled. A phantom orchestra of instruments gathering dust, the ghost of a half-learned language haunting your brain, or perhaps the bittersweet memory of that sourdough starter that met an untimely, moldy end. That initial rush, that intoxicating belief that this time would be different, that this new hobby would finally be the key to unlocking a more vibrant, complete version of yourself, had a familiar trajectory. It soared with exhilarating promise, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, dwindled to a whimper, leaving you with less knowledge and more questions. You'd poured your precious time and hard-earned money into these nascent passions, only to watch them dissipate like mist, leaving behind not just wasted investment, but often a quiet whisper of self-reproach. You embarked on this journey seeking clarity for that frustrating cycle, yearning for an explanation beyond a simple lack of willpower or some innate personal flaw. What began as a quest for answers about why interest fades has evolved into a comprehensive understanding of your own motivational landscape. We've peeled back the layers of neurological wiring, unmasked the dopamine-driven allure of novelty, and confronted the uncomfortable truth that sometimes we're not running to a new interest, but diligently running away from something else entirely. No longer are you merely a passive observer of your own abandoned aspirations. You now possess a mentor's insight into the very mechanics of your engagement, equipped to interpret the fade not as failure, but as invaluable, actionable feedback. Having navigated the labyrinth of our brain's reward system, confronted the often humorous gap between expectation and reality, and even embraced the strategic wisdom of knowing when to pause or simply let go, you now stand on more solid ground. We've dissected the enthusiasm epidemic that makes us leap before we look, revealing the subtle alchemy where excitement can morph into evasion. You've learned that the secret isn't to force peak motivation indefinitely, an unsustainable and frankly exhausting endeavor, but to understand its cyclical nature, much like the changing seasons. The relentless pursuit of perpetual novelty is a dopamine treadmill, and you've learned how to gracefully step off, trading fleeting sparks for the slow, steady burn of genuine engagement. Imagine a future where every new curiosity doesn't come bundled with a looming expiration date or a pre-packaged guilt trip. Picture yourself approaching a novel skill, not with the breathless, wide-eyed optimism that ignores red flags, but with the cool, discerning eye of a seasoned project manager assessing a new venture. The investment of your time and resources becomes a conscious, informed decision, backed by a foundational understanding of what actually sustains interest, rather than merely what sparks it. Your creative energy, once scattered across a dozen half-hearted attempts, now flows with purpose, directed towards pursuits that genuinely resonate, those that can withstand the inevitable ebb of initial excitement and mature into deeply rewarding endeavors. Consider that guitar in the corner, no longer an accusing monument to past failures, but a potential canvas for a truly researched and intentioned re-engagement. Perhaps that abandoned knitting project won't remain a tangled mess, but a testament to your newfound ability to discern between a passing fancy and a craft that offers genuine solace. This isn't about becoming a master overnight or even achieving perfection. It's about the profound liberation of knowing your own patterns, of understanding when to push, when to pause, and when to pivot. Your life becomes a portfolio of interests managed with grace and wisdom, where each pursuit, whether sustained or strategically released, contributes to a richer, more intentional existence. Your first practical step, the immediate shift from reader to doer, begins with choosing one new interest that has recently caught your eye, or, for bonus points, revisiting a recently abandoned one, and committing to a pre-mortem research sprint today. Don't buy anything. Don't even touch the credit card. Instead, spend a focused hour or even just 30 minutes seeking out the unglamorous truths. Find 3 candid accounts from people who quit this exact hobby around the 6-week mark. Identify the most tedious, repetitive aspect of learning it, and honestly project the 12-month cost in time and resources. For that chosen interest, before the sun sets, ask yourself, am I willing to tolerate that? That small, honest inquiry is the friction that separates fleeting fantasy from genuine, durable curiosity. Remember, this isn't about achieving flawless execution from day one. It's about embracing the awkward, messy process of becoming competent, acknowledging that the most fascinating discoveries often happen when you're still terrible. Your past failures aren't verdicts on your character. They are invaluable data points, charting your unique motivational map. You now possess the insight to interpret these patterns, to recognize that the initial burst of enthusiasm is merely the siren call of novelty, not a binding contract for lifelong devotion. Your goal isn't to outsmart your brain's reward system, but to collaborate with it, understanding its whims and nudging it towards sustained, meaningful engagement. You have acquired the tools to discern true interest from mere distraction, to plan with empathy for your future self, and to cultivate curiosity that burns brighter than fleeting novelty. The cycle of starting strong and fading fast is no longer a bewildering curse, but a predictable season you are now equipped to navigate. So, go forth, engage, explore, and, yes, even strategically quit when necessary. For the truest passion isn't about what you start, but what you choose to sustain with intention and joy. As you stand on the precipice of this new understanding, consider the broader implications of your journey. This isn't just about hobbies or personal interests. It's about a fundamental shift in how you approach life itself. The skills you've honed in managing your interests can be applied to relationships, career choices, and personal growth. Each decision becomes a deliberate act, informed by a deeper understanding of what truly matters to you. This newfound clarity allows you to navigate life's complexities with a sense of purpose and direction that was previously elusive. In this journey, you've learned to embrace the ebb and flow of motivation, recognizing that it's not a constant force, but a dynamic one that requires nurturing and understanding. You've discovered the importance of patience and persistence, knowing that true mastery and fulfillment come not from rushing through experiences, but from savoring them, allowing them to unfold at their own pace. This approach not only enriches your personal pursuits, but also enhances your overall quality of life, fostering a sense of contentment and satisfaction that transcends fleeting moments of excitement. As you continue to explore new interests and revisit old ones, remember that the journey is as important as the destination. Each step you take, each challenge you face, and each lesson you learn contributes to the tapestry of your life, weaving a rich and vibrant narrative that is uniquely yours. Embrace the process, cherish the experiences, and celebrate the growth that comes from stepping outside your comfort zone and daring to pursue your passions with intention and joy. In the end, it's not about the number of hobbies you master or the accolades you receive. It's about the person you become along the way. It's about cultivating a life that reflects your values, passions, and aspirations, a life that is lived with purpose and meaning. So, as you embark on this new chapter, carry with you the wisdom and insights you've gained, and let them guide you toward a future filled with endless possibilities and boundless joy. This journey of self-discovery and intentional living is a testament to your resilience and adaptability. You've learned to navigate the complexities of your own motivations, to understand the intricate dance between desire and discipline. This newfound awareness empowers you to make choices that align with your true self, fostering a life that is not only fulfilling, but also deeply rewarding. As you continue to grow and evolve, remember that each decision you make is a step toward a more authentic and meaningful existence. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and cherish the journey. For it is in the pursuit of our passions that we find our truest selves.